Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unravel the mysteries lurking in the shadows and explore the stories that send shivers down your spine. From unsolved crimes to paranormal encounters, from eerie legends to the unknown, we're here to take you on a journey into the unexplained. Every story has layers, and every layer brings us closer to the truth or deeper into the mystery. So grab a seat, turn down the lights, and get ready to dive into the unknown. This is the Deep Dive.
Ever watch those old spy movies? You know, where somebody jams a device into a computer and boom, the whole city's plunged into darkness. Turns out, that's not just Hollywood fantasy anymore. Today, we're diving headfirst into the very real and very unsettling world of cyber warfare.
Buckle up.
We're talking about the virus that changed everything, Stuxnet.
This is a big one.
We're digging into two sources, Stuxnet, World War III, and 0 days.
Stuxnet. And let me tell you, this isn't your typical data breach, folks.
Oh, no.
We're not talking about stolen credit card numbers here. Stuxnet could inflict damage in the real world, the kind that used to require, well, bombs and armies.
Real-world consequences. That's what makes this so different, so significant.
So what exactly was Stuxnet? At its core, it was a computer virus.
But we're not talking about something your IT guy could zap with a quick software update.
Not even close.
This thing makes your average computer virus look like a kid playing with a pocket calculator.
Yeah, the Stuxnet World War III source really drives that point home.
Yeah, they really get into the weeds on this. For one, the sheer size of this thing. The code was 20 times larger than your typical virus.
20 times. That's insane.
The same, right.
And there's a reason for that. Think of it like this, a larger code base. It's like having a much bigger toolbox.
Okay, I'm listening.
More tools mean more options. In Stuxnet's case, more room to hide, more complexity, and frankly, more ways to really mess things up for anyone trying to unravel it.
Speaking of messing things up, let's talk about those zero-day exploits.
Yes, 0 days.
I know it sounds like something out of a sci-fi flick, but bear with me.
It does, doesn't it? But this is all too real.
Basically, a zero-day exploit is like a hidden backdoor in a computer system.
A vulnerability that nobody knows about, not even the people who designed the system.
And Stuxnet was full of them. Imagine Fort Knox, right? But built on a foundation of Swiss cheese. That's what security experts were dealing with here.
It was a nightmare scenario.
But the big question is, what was all this digital firepower aimed at? What was the target?
Well, the source, they really lay it out there.
So,
Industrial control systems, the things that run our power grids, our factories even, and this is the scary part, nuclear facilities. And they weren't targeting just anyone. This was laser focused on one country in particular, Iran.
Iran, right. So, to understand why Iran was in the crosshairs, we need to rewind a bit.
A little history lesson. I like it.
See, at the time, Iran's nuclear program was a huge source of global tension.
Right.
The U.S., Israel, they were deeply concerned about Iran's ambitions to develop nuclear weapons.
So it's like a high-stakes game of chess, right? Everyone's making their moves, trying to outmaneuver each other.
Exactly. Sanctions, diplomacy, there were whispers of covert operations. The situation was incredibly tense.
And that's where Stuxnet comes in.
This is where it gets really interesting. You see, Stuxnet wasn't just about spying or stealing secrets anymore.
It was a whole new ballgame.
It was an act of war, plain and simple. Think about it. Physical damage, sabotage, but instead of sending in commandos or dropping bombs, they used code. Pure digital destruction. They really make you think about the sheer scale of it all. This wasn't some lone wolf hacker in their basement.
Oh, absolutely not. This had nation-state written all over it.
Yeah.
The resources, the sophistication, it all pointed to a well-funded, highly organized operation.
Right. Somebody with a serious agenda.
Yeah.
And 0 days.
Stuxnet drops some pretty heavy hints about who that somebody might be.
They do. But we'll get to that later.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly powerful virus, Stuxnet, aimed at Iran's industrial infrastructure. But what exactly were they targeting? What was the bullseye?
Well, get ready to dive into the heart of it all. The Natanz nuclear facility.
Sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Picture this.
Yeah.
Deep beneath the Iranian desert.
You've got this heavily fortified underground facility. Thousands of centrifuges, all spinning at incredibly high speeds, enriching uranium. It was the crown jewel of Iran's nuclear program. Crawling with IAEA inspectors, too. They wanted to make sure everything was above board. And somehow, Stuxnet managed to slip past all of it.
A nightmare.
This source, they really get into the nitty-gritty here.
Hit me with the details.
You have the cybersecurity experts like Liam O'Murchu and Eric Cheen.
Okay.
They were the ones who really cracked the case.
So what'd they find?
Picture this, they're poring over this code line by line, trying to figure out how this thing works, what it's doing, and most importantly, how to stop it.
It's like a digital game of cat and mouse.
Exactly. And in this case, the mouse was one heck of a formidable opponent. What they discovered was that Stuxnet wasn't just content with, passively spying or stealing data. This thing was designed to cause real physical damage.
You're talking sabotage.
Precisely. And the way it did it was ingenious and terrifying.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell me more.
Remember all those centrifuges spinning away deep underground?
Yeah, enriching uranium.
Right. Well, Stuxnet was designed to manipulate them, to play this deadly game with their rotational speeds.
Deadly game? How so?
Okay, so imagine this. Stuxnet would subtly, almost imperceptibly, crank up the speed of these centrifuges, pushing them beyond their limits, making them spin faster and faster.
Oh, man. I can see where this is going.
Faster and faster until, boom, they just tear themselves apart. But here's the thing, it didn't stop there. It would also slam on the brakes, bringing other centrifuges to a screeching halt, causing even more damage.
So it's like a 1-2 punch. First, it makes them spin too fast, then it slams on the brakes. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
It was a masterpiece of sabotage, but here's the truly chilling part. Stuxnet didn't just wreak havoc, it also covered its tracks.
What do you mean?
It was so sophisticated that it actually tricked the control systems into thinking everything was A-OK. No alarms, no warnings.
Yeah.
Just destruction.
So the Iranians are seeing their equipment malfunction, these vital, highly complex machines just tearing themselves apart, and they have no idea why. Must have been unnerving, to say the least.
It would be like watching a ghost dismantle your house, brick by brick, and not being able to do a thing about it. The psychological impact alone must have been enormous.
And that's where the real brilliance and the danger of Stuxnet comes in, doesn't it? The source, they really hammer this point home. This wasn't just about the immediate damage. It was about the ripple effects.
It was a wake-up call, a shot across the bow for the entire world.
Because up until that point, cyberattacks, they were mostly seen as, an annoyance.
Right. A way to steal some data, maybe disrupt a few websites. An inconvenience, sure, but not necessarily a major threat.
But Stuxnet changed all that.
Completely. It was a paradigm shift. Because suddenly, everyone realized that you could wage war with code. You could inflict real-world damage, physical damage, without ever firing a shot.
And the fallout was immediate, wasn't it? That 0 days.
The source goes into this in detail. Iran, understandably, they went into overdrive trying to figure out what hit them.
And who hit them?
They poured resources into their cyber capabilities, beefing up their defenses, developing their own offensive capabilities.
They basically went from 0 to 60 in the cyber warfare arena almost overnight.
Yeah.
And can you blame them?
Not really. If someone pulled off something like that on my home turf, I'd be scrambling to catch up, too.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The very attack that was meant to deter Iran's nuclear ambitions ended up pushing them to become a major player in the very type of warfare they were targeted with.
Talk about unintended consequences. But it wasn't just Iran that was paying attention, was it? This was a watershed moment. It was a game changer because suddenly everyone was taking notes, governments, militaries, even those shady hacker groups we hear about on the news.
Stuxnet was like the blueprint, the how-to guide for a whole new generation of cyberweapons.
Precisely. And that's where things get really scary.
Yeah.
Because the source, they reveal something pretty unsettling.
Oh, do tell.
The U.S., worried about the potential fallout from Stuxnet, well, they decided to develop their own contingency plan.
A contingency plan? What, like Stuxnet 2.0?
Think of it as Stuxnet on steroids.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
I called it Nitro Zeus.
Nitro Zeus.
Yeah. And if Stuxnet was sophisticated, Nitro Zeus was in a whole other league. We're talking about a digital weapon capable of crippling Iran's entire infrastructure.
A whole shebang. Power grids, communication networks, everything.
Everything. The source even hints that it's already in place, dormant within Iran's systems, just waiting for the signal.
Whoa, hold on a second. That's intense. I mean, it's like we've stumbled into a whole new era of warfare. Remember those old spy movies we talked about at the beginning? It's like that, but it's actually real life now. And the scary part is, most of us don't even realize it's happening.
Exactly. That's what makes it so dangerous. You see, in traditional warfare, you have battle lines, uniforms, declarations of war.
Rules of engagement.
Exactly. But in cyber warfare, everything is hidden. The lines are blurred. It's like trying to fight a ghost. You never know who's behind the attack or when the next blow might come. And it's not just governments that are at risk anymore.
Right. Think about it. We rely on these interconnected systems for everything these days. Our banks, hospitals, even our traffic lights.
The Stuxnet World War III source, they make a really chilling point. Our reliance on technology, it's become our Achilles heel.
Because we're so connected.
Exactly. We're so interconnected that a single, well-placed attack could cripple entire societies.
It's like the more advanced we become, the more vulnerable we become too. And the scariest part is it feels like we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. If Stuxnet was the opening salvo, what comes next?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there are no easy answers. Both sources agree that we're entering uncharted territory here. The rules of engagement are still being written. The potential for catastrophe is very real. So where do we go from here? I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. What can we as individuals even do in the face of these invisible, incredibly powerful weapons?
It's a bit like the Wild West out there, isn't it? Digitally speaking, at least. So where do we even begin to wrangle this whole new world of cyber warfare?
You hit the nail on the head. It does feel like uncharted territory. But just like in the Wild West, eventually you need to establish some rules of the road.
Lay down the law, so to speak.
In the source, they talk about how hard it is to even know who's behind these attacks. Attribution, they call it. It's incredibly difficult to pinpoint the culprit, let alone bring them to justice.
So it's a bit of a free-for-all right now.
In a sense, yes. And that's why it's so dangerous. Think about it. A teenager with the right skills and an internet connection can potentially cause as much damage as a government agency.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it's not like I have a direct line to the folks at the Pentagon.
You might be surprised. For starters, awareness is huge. The more we understand about the threats, the risks, the more we can start demanding better security. From our governments, from the companies we entrust with our data.
So knowledge is power, even in the cyber realm.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions. When you see a headline about a data breach or a new virus, don't just scroll past it. Think about the implications. What if our power grid went down? What if our financial systems were compromised?
Those are some pretty unsettling thoughts. It makes you want to throw your smartphone in the ocean and move to a yurt in Mongolia, doesn't it?
I get it, I really do. But the reality is we can't just unplug from the modern world. And that's precisely why these conversations are so important. We need to find a way to balance the incredible benefits of technology with the very real risks. It's a tightrope walk for sure. And as we've seen with Stuxnet, the stakes couldn't be higher.
It's not just about stolen data or financial losses anymore.
It's about real-world consequences,
Yeah.
the potential for destruction, even loss of life. The genie's out of the bottle, the code's been written. There's no going back to a pre-Stuxnet world.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for our listeners today?
The world has changed. Cyber warfare is no longer a theoretical threat. It's a reality we have to confront. But just as we've adapted to other threats throughout history, we can adapt to this one. We need to understand the risks, demand better security, and most importantly, we need to talk about it.
Keep those conversations going.
Exactly. Because if we all start paying attention, maybe, just maybe, we can help steer things in a better direction.
A little less cyber Wild West and a little more, well, civilized. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dives into the world of Stuxnet. Hopefully it's been enlightening, if not a little bit unnerving. As always, we want to leave you with something to chew on, a question that came up as we were digging into all of this, something that wasn't directly addressed in our sources, but is definitely worth pondering.
They focused primarily on nation-states, on those big government-sponsored cyber attacks. But what happens when these cyber weapons become more accessible? What happens when any individual, anywhere in the world, with enough know-how and enough malice, can unleash a Stuxnet-level attack? It's a chilling thought, and one that should give us all pause. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the shadowy world of cyber warfare. It's a world we all inhabit now, whether we realize it or not. Stay safe out there.
And that's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive. I hope you enjoyed today's exploration into today's mystery, and that it gave you some valuable insights to think about. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on all our future deep dives. As always, thanks for diving deep with us today. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.